I get messages daily about whether or not you should bring up a specific issue to your recruiter, or you should just keep it on the down low and not lie about it, and then go to MEPS and keep it on the down low again and just, take it to your grave. And today I'm going to answer that question in more detail than I could on Instagram, and hope this helps. So first and foremost, your recruiter is here to help you. He wants to make mission as bad as you want to make it in the military, right? Recruiters have to recruit people. Now, I did this whole video about recruiters lying, and I exposed a lot of the things people believe. Recruiters don't get paid if they enlist people. It's just that if they don't enlist enough people, they get fired, and it could end their career or negatively affect them long term. But there's no commission for bringing people in. If you enlist 3 people or 4 people, the only difference is bragging rights. Doesn't matter. So the bottom line is this: if you have a specific situation and you don't know what to do with it by the time we're done with this video, instead of DMing me, go talk to your local recruiter, and I'll give you some pointers on that as well, because they're going to be able to specifically dig into your scenario and point you in the right direction, the best decision for your specific instance. So here's what you do. You tell your recruiter everything. And then if your recruiter tells you that it's not worth bringing up to anybody but him, you take it to the grave with you. That's what you do. You don't take whatever your recruiter said, go to MEPS and tell them that he was trying to make you be shady, and then be honest, because now what you're doing is you're disqualifying yourself because you're bringing up stuff that your recruiter told you not to. There's probably a reason. And you're also threatening his livelihood and his family's, when really he was trying to help you, because that's what he was trying to do. Recruiters will put their own neck on the line to help you get through if what you're bringing up is not worth bringing up. And then if you go and tell them at MEPS, oh, my recruiter told me to lie about this, but I don't want to, so you should get him in trouble, which I had a comment on my video of someone who was bragging about doing this, ruin the guy's family. And guess what? The kid never got to join because the recruiter was genuinely trying to help him. And this wasn't I killed someone and my recruiter told me not to say anything, and no, they're going to find out about that. I'll tell you about kind of the gray area stuff I'm talking about here in a second, because I also am not a fan of the lie to MEPS unless it's genuinely not something to worry about. And here's what I want you to reframe. I want you to reframe, it's not the recruiter telling you to lie, and it's not you lying to get through MEPS. It is advising you on what not to say, because there are things that aren't worth bringing up, because it'll overcomplicate or disqualify you in the MEPS process and could be a non-issue. Perfect example. Let's say when you were 6 years old, you used an inhaler for bronchitis. And you know that it was for bronchitis. It was a one-time thing. You never used it again. You did not have asthma. If you bring that up and you have absolutely no records, then now you're going to have to get a pulmonary functions test to prove you don't have asthma, because you said you used an inhaler. And even if you mentioned it was for bronchitis, there's no way to prove whether or not you had bronchitis, because there's no records. And so they will default to, hey, well, let's be safe. Let's get a pulmonary functions test. Now, depending on the level of pulmonary functions test that doctor requires of you, it could be a pain in the ass. And if they want you to do the really intense one, we're talking it could be a couple $1,000. That's not fun. And your recruiter, if you bring that up, is going to be like, dude, if you never used an inhaler and you played sports in high school, you obviously didn't have asthma. It obviously wasn't for asthma. So because we can't prove that it wasn't for asthma, and it's obviously a non-issue, just don't bring it up. That's the kind of gray area stuff. Another example would be, hey, I think I had asthma when I was a kid. Well, why? I don't know. I got winded going upstairs. Maybe you were overweight. Maybe you were out of shape. But if you never got diagnosed with asthma, you never had an inhaler, then don't say anything. Rule 1 of MEPS is do not self-diagnose. Do not say things that could mean you now have to, same thing, go get a pulmonary functions test because you brought up you might have had asthma, even though you never had asthma. If you've never had an inhaler, you've never been documented with asthma, then don't bring up that you might have asthma. So here's the deal. It's not lying about your medical or lying to MEPS if a recruiter is guiding you through the process of not self-diagnosing. And so if you had diagnosed issues, that's one thing. If you had a surgery, that's another thing. If, whatever. And there are waivers for this stuff. But I see a lot of applicants these days who it's cool to have something wrong with you, it seems like these days. And so kids will be like, I'm ADHD. Well, if you never got tested and you were never on Adderall or Ritalin or whatever, then as far as anyone else is concerned, you don't have ADHD. But if you bring up that you have ADHD and now there's no documents, no records, no whatever, you're going to get tested. And most psychologists will agree with you if you go in there with the mentality that you have ADHD, because in their mind, it's a harmless thing and they can potentially, they make a little bit of money off the prescriptions. I don't know, right? It's a kind of a rigged game. Everybody has some level of ADHD. In fact, when I went to boot camp for the Marine Corps, My mom has this distinct memory of the general at boot camp talking about the personality of a lot of the kids, the applicants who make the ideal Marine. And they are like talking about people who, as described as like getting in trouble, not paying attention in class, always on adventures, like basically fit ADHD criteria. But having ADHD tendencies and never being diagnosed is not the same as having ADHD in a way that will keep you from being in the military. Whereas if you are on prescription ADHD meds and can't function without them right now, that would disqualify you from the military. And so this is another example of you saying like, I have ADHD, and your recruiter's like, shh. No, you didn't. There's nothing in your record. You've never been diagnosed. You've never been on medications. You've never whatever. Everybody has it to some level. So you keep your freaking shut and you don't bring that up at MEPS because you're going to screw yourself. So now if you go up to MEPS and you're like, my recruiter told me to lie about this. Now the recruiter gets in trouble and you're going to get disqualified or sent through all these ADHD tests when really it was a non-issue to begin with. So those are the kind of gray areas I'm talking about. So like, go to your recruiter about stuff. Now, if you're outright, like you watch my video that I have and you can search it up on like permanent disqualifiers from the military, you're like, I did heroin, I've been on depression, I tried to kill myself, like, and I'm missing a testicle. Like, there's no waiver for half that stuff. And so if your recruiter's like, lie about that, well, now you're in a whole different ethical thing. And if you're like, well, I'm not going to say anything, like, or they're going to find out you're missing a testicle. I promise. There's no hiding that. Just like there's no hiding being deaf. There's no hiding being blind. Like it's going to be found out, right? So there are things like, let's say you had a thing and you know you had a thing and it could disqualify you from the military. And there's no record of it. Nobody else knows. You've never told a soul. And it's not something that has ever happened again. For all intents and purposes, let's just say it was a drug. You did a drug that the Marine Corps, the military has viewed as not a drug that should be allowed ever having tried to join the service. And you chose to take that to your grave. Nobody will ever know. And unless you do that drug again and you get caught, it's a non-issue, right? Because if you don't do the drug ever again and you did it once, it was a whatever. I'm not telling you to lie about that, but you could make that decision for yourself. And as long as you kept that, whatever. And so maybe that's not something that you want to bring up to your recruiter. And that's a conversation for you to have with yourself, and that's between you and God. But if it's something that, like, you have a legal thing, you're going to have to bring it up. It's going to have to be known. So you can't lie about something like that because it's going to come out. And so you're going to have to do the waivers. A recruiter is not going to tell you to lie about something that could come back and haunt them because they are putting their entire career on the line for you. And if they were to do that, my hope is that you would honor the fact that they're putting their career on the line for you enough that you would either say, I'm not going to lie about that and I'm not going to be able to join the military, or you would do what your recruiter's asking of you and nobody would ever know that this happened. And you wouldn't be like the kid in that comment who was like, my recruiter told me this and screw my recruiter, I'm going to oust him. And then you're still not going to join because your recruiter was right. That does disqualify you. And now you've ruined a family. Well, and some people are like, well, it's not ethical. Okay, I got it. I understand that. But like ruining someone's life for giving you advice to try to help you make it through to a goal that you want to achieve is kind of shitty. Like, honestly, you're not the type of person when anyone was in the military anyway. And as I mentioned, they may advise you not to mention things that are a non-issue, but could be perceived as an issue if the doctor at MEPS is having a bad day. So there's this old joke that we tell as recruiters, and that is, what do you call the guy or girl who graduates at the bottom of their class in medical school? The absolute worst, just barely made it through, graduates medical school. You call them a doctor. You do. And yeah, who do you think works at MEPS? Because it's probably not the top of the class guy who could be a brain surgeon making $750,000 a year that takes the job at MEPS, which I don't know their salary, but I can't imagine is $750,000 a year to just review documents and say, that looks good, that doesn't look good. Here's what you need to know. The job of the doctor at MEPS is to disqualify, and the job of the recruiter is to qualify. Now, I'm not saying it's to lie. Like, the recruiter is to weed out all the stuff and then be like, here's how we get you into the military. Like, this is, you want to go, here's how we get you there. And the MEPS doc is like, this could come back to bite you. We need to see more docs, and we need more evidence. We need more this, we need more that. And so like the MEPS doctor doesn't simplify the process for you. The recruiter's there to help you. So let your recruiter give him all the information so that he can make the best bet and help you out. And there are things that MEPS just never needs to know about. Like if you think you had a bronchitis inhaler, but there's no documents that you can find anywhere, and you know you never had asthma, you never used an inhaler, like that MEPS doctor could disqualify you for that, make you run 1 million miles a day, like make you take a pulmonary functions test, make you run 1 million errands, whatever. Especially if he's having a bad day or you catch him towards the end of his day. Like we had some really weird stuff get flagged by the MEPS doctor. And so it just became obvious or easier for some of that stuff to just be like, hey, that's obviously a non-issue. Let's not bring it to anyone's attention because it doesn't exist. Okay, so here's the wrap up for me. If you know that whatever this thing is disqualifies you from the military, but there's no record of it, no chance you'd ever get caught unless you brought it up, that's between you and God. Do not message me asking me to give you permission to lie about stuff. That's between you and God. If you know there's a waiver for whatever this issue is, tell your recruiter and he'll advise you on how to go through it and get that waiver done. That is like getting the waiver. Might take a little bit longer, but that's the right path. Now, if you don't know whether there's a waiver or it's PDQ or whatever, ask ChatGPT and Google to help you. Do some homework, do some research. It is not hard to go and find the MEPS qualification manual. Actually, hang on. Now, I'm not saying this has every answer in it, but I'm going to give you guys the secret here, right? It's called the DoDI, which is the Department of Defense Instruction. And you want the DODI 6130.03, which is volume 1 or whatever. You can check the date. This one's dated for effective. The most recent change was May of 2024. So this is probably fairly close. And this is literally called the Medical Standards for Military Service, Appointment, Enlistment, or Induction. And so, for example, let's say bronchitis. History of airway hyperresponsiveness, including asthma, reactive airway disease, exercise-induced bronchospasm, or asthmatic bronchitis after the 13th birthday. So if you have any of those things, that would be disqualifying. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that there's not a waiver. You'd have to do homework. But like fundamentally, if this was in your record with no proof that it had cleared up, the MEPS doctor would say we need more information. Or let's go with, let's do another one. This is what it says about ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's disqualifying if these things are persistent. So if it had a recommended or prescribed individual education program, 504 plan, or work accommodations after the 14th birthday. So if you required all that stuff after 14, that's what it says. A history of comorbid mental disorders. I'm not going to Google all that, but you could do it. Prescribed medication in the previous 24 months. So if you had taken meds in the last 2 years, that would be holding you off. Prescribed. Documentation of adverse academic, occupational, or work performance. Okay, so those 4 things. So looking at that, what you can determine is this is written as, if it meets these criteria, is disqualifying. This is written for what disqualifies you. So then you could say, hey, I didn't require an IEP or 504 plan work accommodations. I don't have a history of comorbid mental disorders, whatever that is. I haven't taken medication in the last 24 months, and there's no documentation that my work or school, my adverse academic, occupational, or work performance, like any of that was bad. So if you had taken ADHD medication 3 years ago, you're off it, and there's no documentation that anything was suffering, you don't have an IEP, you don't have whatever, then per this, you'd be good. Now, depending on the doctor and the medical records, you might get instantly qualified, or you might need a little bit of a medical waiver, which would basically be just proving that you're all good, which could be a statement from your teacher or your boss saying like, no issues, and you saying, I took the meds, I don't anymore, I've been off them for this long, I'm good. But like, you can do a little bit of homework, and you can kind of devise your own answers here. So there's your like super secret tip. And then super pro tip here, if you're getting really crazy, and I hope you guys don't all do this. So this should be just like in like absolute, you're about to take something to the grave with you, between you and God decision mode, would be call a recruiting station out of state, pretend you're like a parent and your kid has this issue, and just be like, my kid really wants to join the military, but he's got this problem. Here's what the problem is. Can you tell me whether or not this would be something that disqualifies him so that I can like let him down easy? And then you'll find out right away, like, oh, no, there's a waiver for that. That's no big deal. Oh, okay, cool. Well, then bring it up. Oh, no, that's absolutely disqualifying. Hey, between you and God, whatever you choose to do there. But the right thing would be like, you're disqualified, right? But again, I'm giving you the info. It's like, look, I'm not going to advise you to lie to join the military. That is a decision you need to make for yourself. But that said, there are sometimes situations in life where it's nobody's business and it's between you and whatever, and you got to make the right decision for you. As long as it's not something that's going to come back to bite you in the ass or bite your platoon in the ass or whatever, like, definitely don't be like, I'm lying about having a bee allergy that makes me swell up and die and I need an EpiPen. Because you get to go on a deployment with that EpiPen and then you get stung by a bee and now you die and people got to carry you. Like, that it ain't no joke. So like, you gotta, like, some of this stuff's serious. Like, if I'm being real, I wasn't 100% honest about my entire everything when I joined the military. It wasn't anything bad. In fact, I made it through MEPS. I was completely honest. Everything was good. And then I got hurt while I was in the delayed entry program before boot camp. And it wasn't a major issue, and I'm not going to go into any injury, any whatever it is. It wasn't a major issue, but it was something that probably could have delayed me from going to boot camp for like 2 or 3 weeks. But I was able to do all the exercise requirements that injury in theory would have hindered. And so I just didn't say a word and shipped. And it was never an issue. But again, like, that was something small. It was not something that would have disqualified me in the first place. It just might have delayed me a month and I didn't want to be delayed, and I passed all the tests and I was healthy and I'd done all the whatever. And so like, the funny thing is I actually told my recruiter and we actually got all the documents together, my mom and I, and I didn't realize until like 7 years later that it just never made it into the record. Because he was just like, yeah, you're all good. I took care of it. Don't worry about it. Don't bring it up. And then when I was a recruiter, I'm looking through all my stuff and I'm like, hey, wait a minute. That's not in my record. And so I called him jokingly. I was like, hey, man, like, now that I'm a recruiter and I know the game, like, what's up? And he's like, oh, yeah, I just told you it was good and you didn't need to bring it up anymore. I didn't submit it. So like, whatever. But again, non-issue. And I actually was going to be honest about it. But like, you know, stuff happens and I'm all good. I made it 13 years in the Marine Corps. I'm totally fine. That issue was never an issue. Real quick, if you DM me with specific enlistment questions or like wanting random, like specific advice on what you should do in the military or like about your situation, I'm going to point you towards your recruiter. I haven't been in the recruiting game for 9 years. The last year I was a boss, I wasn't even a recruiter, so like 10 years. And things change enough and every branch is different that like your best point of contact on all of this is your local recruiter. And if you've got something that you're like, I don't know if I should bring it up to them, then like call a recruiting station out of state and just don't give them your name so it doesn't end up in a system. And always remember this recruiterism when you're filling out paperwork. No, NO is the abbreviation for new opportunity. Like, hey, nothing wrong with me, I'm going. And yes is the acronym for your enlistment stops, right? Like, if you, every time you put yes on something, it's more documentation, it's more whatever. So like, don't put yes or say yes to things that aren't actually legit. Don't self-diagnose. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. You know, I'm not telling you to lie about stuff, but like, understand the gray areas and the like, you know, self-diagnosis stuff. And it's not lying to deny self-diagnosis. You're not a doctor. You're not a medical professional. You might think you have a thing, but there's no proof. You never went to a doctor. You never got treated. You never whatever, and it hasn't stopped you in life. So like, just don't shoot yourself in the foot. I'm going to give you the answer that ChatGPT gave me and is the right answer. No, you should not lie during the military entrance processing station exam, and here's why. Honesty is legally required. Lying during the military entrance processing is a federal offense and is considered a fraudulent enlistment. Concealing medical issues can put you at serious risk of further injury or harm. It can also put your unit in danger in training. Waivers are often available, so why risk it when you can just get a waiver? Mental health honesty matters, and you should be upfront about it because, again, often waiverable. The bottom line is that lying at MEPS is never worth the risk. Integrity is one of the military's core values, and if you're unsure about something, talk to your recruiter and they can advise you in the best way forward. And last thing, I filmed a video on what to expect when you go to MEPS, like the entire process. It's a full brief on exactly how that day is going to look and feel for you. And if you click on this video right here, it'll take you there to check it out. And I would recommend you watch that before you go to MEPS because it's just a really good idea to familiarize yourself with that process because it is just a little bit of a stressful day and there's no need to make it any more stressful by being unaware of what to expect. So if you got something out of this video, subscribe, share it with a friend, and have a great day.